Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Caitlin Champion, and I'm the Economic Development Manager for Invest in Toulouse agency. And today I will be presenting opportunities for development in Toulouse with a focus on segments in automotive, aeronautics, additive manufacturing, and R&D. So before getting into these opportunities, it's important to show you where Toulouse is located and why it's a strategic location geographically. So as you can see, in terms of accessibility by plane, it's quite simple. There are flights from Paris Charles de Gaulle every 20 minutes or orally. By train, it's about 4 hours from Paris or 3 hours from Barcelona. And it's important to note that this is the most frequented flight in Europe. Like I said, there's flights going every 20 minutes from Paris to Toulouse. And then in terms of accessibility internationally from India, you can see we have direct flights to Paris from the cities listed, but then also once you're in the UK, these are the direct flights that we have to Toulouse. So in order to really understand where Toulouse fits in terms of business opportunities, we should look at standings on a European scale, so at the national level first. In 2019, France attracted more FDI projects than any other European country, putting it ahead of the UK and Germany. And so in numbers, this means that investment went up 17%. We gained 1,197 new projects. And then in Europe, the top 3 sectors were digital investments at 19%, and then business services, and then also transportation manufacturers and suppliers had a 7% market share. But in terms of jobs created from FDI, transportation manufacturers and suppliers held 23% of the market share. That makes it first by a long shot ahead of all other industries. And so, as you previously saw, Toulouse is in southwestern France near the Spanish border. It is the capital of the Occitanie region where we are, and it's the 4th city in France in terms of population. We have 1.3 million inhabitants. We are, however, the first city in several categories, and the first of that being net job creations. And it's been that way for about the past 10 years, I believe. We are also first in economic growth, first in R&D expenditure, and we are also first in talent retention. So what that means is Toulouse keeps more students in the city upon graduation than any other city in France. So that's great in terms of recruiting highly qualified talent. And to get into industrial investments, France has been #1 in Europe for the past 10 years, or perhaps more. And the region with the most industrial investments is Occitanie region, where we are located. And we are also home to the largest industrial site in France known as the Aerospace. And one of the reasons the industrial sector is so successful here is its willingness to work together. So here we're going to talk about TOM PES. It's an association that brings 25 of the most important industrial accounts and institutions together, from contractors to integrators to equipment manufacturers. These entities primarily represent the aeronautics, space, and embedded systems industries. And the industrial and regional chamber of commerce are also involved in order to represent small and intermediate-sized companies. And the main objectives of this organization are to grow investments, to promote local activity, and to develop partnerships. And so given our industrial ecosystem, you'll note that many of the key players in industry are present here. Airbus has its global headquarters here. Thales is #1 in world in the world for air traffic control. They're also located here. In automotive and mobility, you have actors like Continental. This is a German company, but they have their digital services headquartered here in Toulouse, and their primary activities is to work on the E-Horizon project. This is a European project to make vehicles more autonomous, safer, and more connected. We also have in health and cosmetics, we can't forget that we have Pierre Fabre, who is the world's second largest dermocosmetics company. And then in the last column, you can see we have tech integrators. So one I wanted to really highlight is Capgemini. They have their largest account in the world with Airbus here. So they've been really integral in ensuring that the industries here become current and remain current in digital transformation. So when people talk about industry in Toulouse, they're automatically going to think about aerospace, but the city hosts all forms of transportation from the ground to outer space. This slide here gives you a better representation of all of that. When the French government started decentralizing all of its businesses from Paris to its regions, Toulouse was naturally designated as the aerospace capital, because it's here in Toulouse where we had the historic first air courier line. Over time, aeronautics brought with it all other forms of industry. The know-how in engineering for air transportation was then transmitted to space, but also the other way, so to ground mobility and then underground mobility. You see, it's our know-how in mobility that led Hyperloop TT to establish their European R&D test track here in Toulouse. And so in the automotive industry, it's of course very well represented in Toulouse. The entire supply chain is present. In manufacturing, you can see all of the companies that have already been present on the other slides. NXP, a Dutch-American semiconductor company, that has their automotive department located here in Toulouse. And they're also interested in smarter, more secure vehicles. That's a very common trend here in our city. In vehicle maintenance and recycling, you have companies like EasyMile. I just want to highlight this is a local tech unicorn company making autonomous shuttles that have already been deployed around the world. And you can actually see them here in Toulouse driving around our hospital campus. In energy and infrastructure, we have major energy conglomerates such as Bouygues. So again, just kind of doing a tie between telecom and energy into mobility, working on vehicle connectivity. And then, of course, a bunch of systems and system services and solutions. So anything to do with tech integration, transformation, etc. There are two automotive players in particular I wanted to point out in further detail. The first one is Actia. They are specialized in manufacturing of electronic components used to manage systems in automotive, telecom, and energy fields. Their automotive division represents nearly 90% of the group's consolidated turnover. And these are both spin-offs of Siemens VDO, that's in Continental. So the reason I wanted to point these out is actually that in France, they're regularly elected as French Factories of the Year in terms of innovation, efficiency, and just they're forefront runners here. They yes, highly automated factories of the future. So a lot of Industry 4.0 tied into the production of a future mobility. And yeah, it's a huge source of employment. Actia's global headquarters here has 3,800 employees, and it's a huge source of employment. So we're not only aerospace. And yes, Continental Automotive, which I had pointed out previously, was working on the E-Horizon project here in Toulouse. Head office in Toulouse employs 3,000 plus people across 4 factories. On this slide, I wanted to point out our totem cluster. So all these players that I've just presented to you, they come together under this cluster called the totem cluster. This gathers mobility industrial players specializing in design, tests, manufacturing solutions, system services, and energy. This cluster allows for regional players to combine sources to increase state and regional funding. And altogether, it federates about 200 companies dedicated to sustainable and intelligent mobility. And so now to summarize everything really briefly, automotive in Toulouse has about 250 companies. That's 82,000 jobs total. It's a 3.5 billion euro market. And they all come together, a lot of these players, under the totem cluster I just presented to you. Now, of course, we do have to talk about aeronautics. I just got done saying that we aren't only aeronautics, but it's important to highlight as well. As I said already, Airbus has their global headquarters here, but it's not the only reason that we're Europe's aerospace and space capital. As the aeronautics and space capital, the respective industries and entire chains, supply chains are present here. So again, Airbus and ATR are some of the primary aircraft manufacturers and final assembly lines. But then in design and manufacturing OEMs, we have several of these other companies that you have seen. Safran is really highly specialized in electric propulsions and in motor systems. Our own cabin services, of course. And then innovation SMEs and engineering. So you can see Actia we presented for automotive, but they're also a really important player in aeronautics. So a lot of our players here go from underground to outer space in terms of mobility. So here are some figures explaining why we are Europe's aerospace capital. There are 1,000 companies alone in aeronautics in Toulouse. This strong presence is what allows for manufacturing from start to finish to happen all in one place. And thanks to this, we were able to deliver 939 planes in 2019. So on this slide, we have a breakdown that goes further into space. Note that 25% of all European workforce in space is here in Toulouse, and also a third of all French aerospace workforce is in Toulouse. The city is home to CNES, so this is France's National Space Agency, and it's also home to the French Space Command. So this is an internal component of the French Air Force, and it deals heavily in defense and the development and implementation of military aerospace policy here for the whole nation. And now to summarize our aeronautics figures. Again, it's a huge chunk of our employment with 124 industrial employees. A third of a French aerospace workforce is here in Toulouse. It's a 10 billion euro market, with 1.35 billion alone in R&D and funding. And these companies all come together under the Aerospace Valley Cluster, which I will present later on. And of course, we can't have industry as advanced as we do in Toulouse without talking about additive manufacturing. So the companies are sustained by these previously mentioned automotive and aeronautics industries. And excluding contractors, we do have 30 companies that specialize in additive manufacturing here. Again, the entire value chain is present. In manufacturing, you have companies like Prismed. This is a joint venture formed between Yamayachi Special Steel in Japan and Prismed Group, based in France. So they specialize in metallurgy and 3D printing for aerospace, defense, and automotive. We also have companies like Feel Object. They use additive manufacturing to develop tools and electronics to facilitate the integration of handicapped people into society. And then again, software, also integral parts. We have some players present in that. And then the research organizations, you see Cirimat. This is a highly specialized company in, excuse me, materials and testings for the city of Toulouse, but also internationally. Pardon me. So I also wanted to present some research labs that are even more specialized. IRT Saint-Exupéry is the Technological Research Institute here. They're a world-class research institute specialized in aeronautics, space, and embedded systems. There are 8 of these around the world, and one of them is in Toulouse. They have 33 research projects that have been undertaken since the development in 2014. This has totaled almost 33 million euros. And they are specialized in 4 strategic domains, including the first one here listed as you see them popping up, then 2 more electrical aircraft, that's very important for us, and 3 systems engineering and modeling, and intelligent systems communications. And Cirimat that I just brought up, which will be of interest to you. Yes, Interdisciplinary Center for Material Engineering and Research. They are working between academic research, but also partner with the local businesses here to work on projects together and develop proof of concepts. This is done throughout 4 primary axes: material science, nanomaterials, coatings and deposit processes, and material aging and durability. They have about 240 employees, of which there are 90 doctoral students, and there are about 100 project contracts a year. And then in this slide, just wanted to talk about another way to get your foot in the door. This is our solution provider club for Industry 4.0. They identified and lead solution providers for industrial transformation. It works a lot in the same way as the Totem cluster, or they're coming together to co-develop and collaborate on new projects. They want to strengthen the local ecosystem. There are 200 industrial companies present and 90 full-time members. And here are some of the members. In terms of innovation campuses, you have plenty of different options in Toulouse. And this is one way for you to get your project off the ground here, is not only by developing partnerships with the local business ecosystem, but also being involved in the innovation campuses. So the first one I want to discuss is Village Gilles. In 2019, France was selected as Toulouse was selected as France's national reference for mobility. So the initiative will be set in place to establish a campus for intermodal transportation, ground and air mobility. Will be hyper focused on all of these things, including smart infrastructure, like I said, intermodal testing facilities, ground air testing, etc. It will inject about 165 million euro into the development. And the goal is to have any projects from this, any successful projects, not only be deployed nationally, but also internationally, worldwide. Here's a more in-depth focus on it. You can see there are actually several sub-segments all intertwined together and related. It's to bring the local ecosystem together and create synergy and co-collaborate. You have things like green mobility, mobility as a service, but also things like co-working and shared offices, anything to do with mobility and its complementary sub-sectors. And they will all come together under the Francazal Mobility Park. Francazal was the former military airport in Toulouse. It's now home to Hyperloop TT R&D test track. And it's home to companies like EasyMile, the autonomous shuttle company that I talked to you about earlier. So it's a huge area for mobility already. And now they will be establishing this Village project to further develop on that. We also need to talk about AI, which is of the utmost importance in France. So in order to remain competitive in AI, the government passed an initiative called the 3AI, which was to set up campuses around France. Ultimately, 4 were established in AI, and the one in Toulouse is for hybrid and natural AI certification. So basically explaining the logic behind what artificial intelligence is thinking, if we can say that. This will bring together 200 or more researchers. It has over 50 partners. Regional funding and national funding and municipal funding will bring this to about 225 million euros in investments. The idea is to have about 100 startups created by 2023. And there are 2 main areas of focus, which is in mobility and in environment. As I had mentioned earlier, there's also the Aerospace Valley Cluster. This is a global competitiveness cluster in aerospace with over 900 members. Yes, representing 124 industrial employees, a third of all the aerospace workforce, and it's brought in about 1.2 billion euros in R&D projects alone. They also strive to create up to 40,000 new jobs by 2025. And they're really active, not only in aerospace, but you can see in the picture, they also do things in mobility, because a lot of our aerospace players are in ground transportation as well. Excuse me. And then we have to talk about the district, which is within the Aerospace Valley Cluster. This is an acceleration program that provides technical support and helps with partnerships within the network. They offer modular office spaces in the B612. This is the innovation center at the heart of the Aerospace Valley that is welcoming companies. Industrial players often have representatives there, and they're often receiving new companies coming in, startups and medium-sized companies. So none of this innovation would be possible, of course, without having a strong labor pool. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we are #1 in France for R&D investment. But what I didn't mention is that we are also the top ranking in Europe for R&D expenditure. We are the first region that has a share of GDP devoted to R&D, and we are the only region to have reached the 3% objective put in place by the European Commission as part of the Europe 2020 strategy. Again, we're #1 in France in terms of talent retention. And just to give you an idea what our research intensity looks like, that equates to 16.2 researchers per 1,000 employees. Also at the national level, you can see France is very attractive in terms of tax incentives. The French state heavily subsidizes all R&D expenditure, but also the hiring of qualified talent. So the R&D tax credit, for example, is second to none in Europe. 30% of all R&D expenses up to 100 million euros is deducted. And we also have an innovation tax credit for SMEs, so less than 250 employees can benefit from 20% off of eligible innovation expenses. In the bottom corner, you can see the Young PhD tax credit. This is a highly attractive incentive for companies to hire extremely qualified talent at no cost to the employer for 2 years. The French state will pay their salaries. So it incentivizes companies to get qualified talent, and also it encourages employment of this talent. It allows for job security for people with high qualifications. And so now you've seen a huge overview of Toulouse in aeronautics, automotive industry, AI, etc. And how do we tie into this? So we are the economic development agency for Toulouse. We serve as a liaison between you and the business ecosystem. We work actively with all of the partners here and the key accounts to understand their problems and what they're looking to develop in, and we help them find potential partners. This is a free and confidential service. You can see where can you find us. We have a couple events left for the year, but if not, we can post where we will be participating next year once we have those dates finalized. And yeah, here are just a more in-depth look at some of our services. Like I said, we're free and confidential, and we're here to help you develop partnerships and get your project off the ground in Toulouse. Anything you need help with, site selection, HR, help, business setup, anything you need, this is what we're here for. And if you want to know more about particular opportunities in Toulouse, don't hesitate to reach out to me. This is my contact information, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.